our friends that aren't here. And so today we're going to talk about the creative arts in early childhood classrooms. And we're going to think about the state of Tennessee standards too. And in the 10 ELD standards, the categories are a little bit different for the youngest group of age 0 to 4 and for the 4 and 5-year-old group, but you can distill them down to 4 categories: visual arts, music, creative movement and dance, and theater and dramatic play. So these are all based upon children's creative exploration. And in the 4 to 5-year-old group, there's an additional category that only has one standard, and that category is labeled cultural differences. And the one standard is to participate in artistic activities, music, visual art, theater, and dance, representing different cultures. So it's important that that standard is in there. And so I want to kind of highlight it, but really it cuts across the other 4 groups, the other 4 categories. So whenever you think about those other 4 categories, remember that cultural piece, that this should be representing a variety of different backgrounds. And with that in mind, it's also important that our creative arts activities are inclusive. They should be accessible to everyone, regardless of ability. And when we think about the creative arts, we have differences in ability that come from our physical differences. For example, a child who has movement impairment or they're missing a limb. um, we also have differences in accessibility that are really the result of children's experiences. So there are fine motor skills involved in the visual arts, for example, that can have cultural differences based upon children's experience with the kinds of materials and the kinds of instruments. So some cultures place a high emphasis on young children being involved in creative and artistic activities, and some do not. So that right there is causing a different starting point for children in terms of just the physical skills of manipulating those instruments. And so we have to understand that and respect that there's a difference in ability that really comes from different cultural experiences. And I don't even really like using the word ability when we're talking about creative arts, because it's not really some sort of contest to who can draw the best picture. But what I mean is just familiarity with the materials and how they're used. So the next few slides will go through uh, those different categories. And the first category is visual arts. And there's some examples here of what visual arts might look like in an early childhood classroom. But the main point that I really want to make to everyone is that when we're talking about young children, the visual arts really, uh, for the young child, it's more about, especially our youngest, our toddlers and youngest preschoolers, it's more about exploration of the materials. And uh, across those early childhood ages of 0 to 5 and really beyond, the art activities are more about the here and now. They're more about the doing. They're more about the process than they are about the outcome. Now, I'm not saying that preschoolers don't value the product, the outcome. Here's my painting, here's my drawing, because they do, and they love to give those drawings to the people they care about, and they love to get positive feedback on those drawings. But for them, they didn't sit down with the goal of, this is the picture I'm going to create. I'm going to draw a picture that's in my mind going to look like this. This is the goal that I'm moving towards. This is what I want my outcome to be. They're in the moment, and they're sort of in the process of doing it as they go. So for our youngest toddlers, if you can imagine uh, a toddler with their smock on at the painting easel, they're so in the moment of the sensory motor exploration of, here is the feel of that brush on the paper. These are the brush strokes. There's the texture that the paint is making, and the visual sensation of the color and the spread of the color. And as they grow to 3, they're in the moment of this yellow color, and this blue color is making this green color. And across those preschool years, they're, even when they start representing and naming their pictures, they're making it up as they go. They're sort of almost telling a story in that painting. So here, the green now makes a cloud, and the cloud is floating, and ooh, there comes a bird out of the cloud. And so they're making it up as they go without having that preset. And so this is important to the early child educator in a few ways. One is that art activities are open-ended. They don't have that goal to follow. Now, there are craft activities in the preschool years, and that distinction between arts and crafts, as I've said, is kind of my own distinction. But to me, a craft is when we say, here are the steps you follow, and here's what the model is going to look like at the outcome. And and that's not what we're talking about here with visual arts. There's a place for crafts in the preschool classroom. I don't think that we should just abandon crafts. There's some important things to learn there about following directions and using the materials. But but that's not giving us that open-ended value that the non-defined kind of art activity has. That process, the moment of doing and exploring and creating. So it's important that our young children have opportunities to access those art materials freely and to do them without constraint, without models. So one of the mistakes that a lot of early childhood teachers can make is they want to demonstrate how to use a material, and it's okay to model and demonstrate how to hold a paintbrush or how to fold a paper clip. But it's a mistake to, not a paper clip, let's use a pipe cleaner is what we fold. That makes more sense. Uh, so let's say we're showing the fold of a pipe cleaner. We're not going to fold it into a certain shape and say, here's a flamingo shape. Everybody make one of these. We don't want to make that model. If we're thinking, if we want to paint alongside the child, so that we're kind of being a model of using that material, we're not going to absentmindedly draw a picture of a sailboat, because what happens is a couple of things. When we paint that picture, oftentimes the young children are looking at that as the model that they're going to attempt to emulate, and they don't have the experience or the motor skills to make that. And so we give them this kind of subliminal idea that you're not very good at this because you can't make this picture look as good as mine. The other thing that the teacher's setting themselves up for is having a whole bunch of kids saying, make me one next, teacher, make me one next. uh, so if you're going to set along and use those materials, remember, you can model the appropriate use of the material without making a model of what the art should be. So model exploring and making the brushstrokes without creating a specific plan for the children to follow, whether intentional or unintentional. Another place that this comes out is, as important for early child educators, is the kind of comments we make on children's art materials. We should remember that because the child is in the moment and they're not designing this particular outcome, that if we ask them open-ended questions like, oh, what is that? Teacher, it may not be anything. I may not know what it is yet. And you just really put me on the spot there, because now I'm feeling like I was supposed to be making something and I'm embarrassed because I don't know what I've been doing. It's better to say something like, tell me about it, or uh, you've been working really hard there. What's going on? Tell me all about what you're doing. And so that's really the more open-ended question, where they can tell you the process, and they may be telling you that yellow and blue is green now, and that's great and that's wonderful. The other thing that it's to be careful about in terms of those comments is is praise statements. And we fall into a couple of traps there. One is we praise kind of empty praise. We just go around and we say, "Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful." Teacher, is mine beautiful? Yes, it is. And so it feels good for a second and for a few days, but eventually children stop listening to that. It's beautiful because they hear it all the time. It's praise. Remember we talked about child guidance. It should be specific and sincere. And so we're going to talk about things the child is doing. We're not going to focus on the outcome. We're not going to focus on the finished product. We're going to focus on you've been working really hard, or you're really trying new things, or you're really mixing those colors. That's exciting. Tell me all about it. And so in that way, we're giving some appropriate and real praise, but we're not focused on what that outcome is. So allow them to explore the materials and remember that we're thinking about the process and not the product. Another category of the creative arts is music. I don't know. You just walk by kind of waving and doing something there. Yeah. So preschoolers, most preschoolers, I don't want to generalize this here, but most preschoolers enjoy music. They like to sing along. They like to move with the music. And this is a time when we're learning things about pitch and tempo and all those ideas about music and making sounds and using those instruments in creative ways. So instead of just shaking the tambourine, we're jumping up and down to make the tambourine sound. Uh, we're singing along to that favorite tune. We can integrate music both in a specific time on our schedule in a specific place in our classroom, but we can also integrate it throughout. So our group times become a time for singing or instruments. Um, and these can be throughout the dramatic play area, for example, can have places for rhythm and music and sounds. Another category is creative movement and dance. Uh, so one of the things that I want to convince you of is that through we're not just thinking about motor skills here. And motor skills are important, and we'll have a whole week thinking about physical development, and I don't want to downplay the importance of creative movement and dance to the development of motor skills, but there are other advantages too. So through creative movement and dance, we're learning things about math and spatial concepts. We're learning things about language. We're learning, uh, we're telling stories as we act out Three Little Pigs. Okay, that falls under the creative movement and dance group. So it's not a narrow focus here, but there's also a value just for the joy of movement and just for the joy of uh, of that sense of self and space. So dancing and movement can be a way to help preschoolers focus, to help them become engaged in learning things. So be thoughtful and creative about how you incorporate movement and dance into the classroom. And the fourth category is sort of dramatic play, theater. So we're not really thinking about actual performances like putting on a show, but maybe we are. Uh, it would be perfectly appropriate for 4 or 5 year olds to make videos, to make movies of acting out stories like Red Riding Hood, where they take on different roles. Well, that would certainly fall under this group. But also, what follows under this group is the dramatic play. Okay, so remember, there's this progression in dramatic play where our younger toddlers need very realistic sorts of props, uh, and the play is fleeting. It falls apart quickly, and they will act out short sort of scenes that they're very familiar with. And as they grow older, as the time they're 3 and especially 4 and 5, their dramatic play extends beyond the here and now. They're very imaginative. They don't need very realistic props. Now they can sort of create their own props. Uh, all of these things, there's this progression there in that dramatic play. But from the aspect of the arts, it's thinking about children's imagination, thinking about creativity and ways that they are expressing their creativity in this social way as they interact and participate in that dramatic play together. So some reasons that the creative arts are important. Number one is this gives us a connection to nature in the real world. It teaches us the value of arts in our social world. It gives us some opportunities for to enjoy hobbies that are personally fulfilling. For young children, it helps them to develop good work habits. And for example, we learn this process of that we finish our painting and we have some way of indicating whose it is. We put our initials on it or our mark or write our name and we hang it up to let it dry and then we take it home. So there's this idea of learning the steps in this work process. It gives us feelings of success and accomplishment. It can spill over and make other curriculum areas more meaningful. For example, that idea of acting out the stories like Little Red Riding Hood or Three Little Pigs. Well, that ties directly into our language domain. The arts gives us opportunities to transmit our cultural heritage, to look at the art that represents our culture and to participate in that. It establishes a bond between generations as we transmit those culturally relevant aspects of art. And within a group of children, as they work on murals or dramatic play together or music together, it builds a group cohesion. So the arts are connected to other aspects of knowing, like physical knowledge, demonstrating the physical properties of materials, logical mathematical knowledge, our relationship between objects and vocabulary for describing and comparing and evaluating those objects, using symbols, so representational knowledge, that social conventional knowledge where we teach facts and traditions and conventions, and also that idea of metacognition where we think about thinking. That goes on as we participate in the creative arts as well. So teachers, one thing they need to do is give up, there's an extra I in opportunities, but they provide high quality opportunities. They provide engaging materials, time, and space for children to explore. They are enthusiastic about the beauty around them, about the beauty outside, about the beauty of the arts. And so this is one of the things I like to really encourage early childhood folks to do is don't think of that art as the place, especially the visual arts, well, all aspects really, is something that happens just in that designated place within the classroom. Take it outside. That art easel can stand right outside really well. What kind of paintings are we going to draw out in nature? And the same thing is true for dramatic play and music. It should be integrated across the curriculum. So one of the things the teachers do is they think about how can music, visual arts, movement be engaged in these other curricular areas. It should be a time to compliment children, praise them, extend upon their individual, creative, unique contributions. And teachers themselves should strive to be more creative. So, when we're talking to young children about those creative products, I've talked about this a little bit. If we give them those compliments, you know, directly praising young children's art about the outcome of the product is associated with the children being less likely to engage in art materials. So it's almost counterintuitive. When we praise that outcome for young children, it makes it less likely they participate. When we make judgments about children's art, that can really have some negative effects on their later attempts, right? And especially with those art, well, no, This is true of all areas, but in different ways. So think of the visual arts where we need those fine motor skills. If we stop doing those or participating in them, we don't get to practice with those fine motor skills. The same is true with music. If we step back from music and don't engage in it, we don't get those opportunities to practice. Same is true for the dramatic kinds of play and movement and dance. We don't have those opportunities to develop those social strategies. Um, Questions, remember I said that uh, we should ask questions about what they're doing in the process and not the outcome. And the same can be true with probes and correcting statements, that we stifle children's creativity in them doing those unique things by asking them to do things in specific kinds of ways. So here are some potential responses. One is when we acknowledge the children's efforts by saying things like, you worked a long time on it, the impact on the child is that they realize that their work was noticed. When we ask for information like, show me a part you like or tell me something about your picture, the child internalizes, I can tell things about my art that only I know. And when we recognize the progress, this is the third drawing you've made about your field trip, the impact is they start to feel a sense that they've accomplished things. So some more strategies, and in the reading there are specific strategies for each of those different areas, as along with the standards for each of those different areas. But overall, be an enthusiastic model. Make sure the environment is prepared. So the art area, for example, could have a tarp down to keep from spills. There should be smocks ready. There should be some water for cleaning up. There should be clean paintbrushes, not those dried out old things. If you're going to use pie pans to mix the tempera paint, they should be there and clean and not dried out and cakey. So the materials should be ready to go. There should be that organized area. We can collect props and things to have in the environment. We express a value for that creative process. We help the children learn to respect those materials, take care of them, and put them away properly. And we should enjoy music regularly. We encourage creative thinking, demonstrate those techniques without demonstrating an outcome, as I said. Encourage children to keep going and help motivate them, give them ideas for role play and dramatic play. Put up their pictures, their photographs, real objects, animals, and events. Encourage them to pretend, use their imagination, and continue that outdoors. Um, if they're doing something creative, connect that to that social arbitrary knowledge, connect that to concepts. So if they tell you they drew a picture of the moon, use that as a springboard to talk about the moon. Know how to use the material and before the children use it, or that it's in good shape and good repair. If you're going to show something new, demonstrate it. Uh, use picture books as examples of art. Use different kinds of questions, but open-ended questions about what the children are doing, what's happening, what the process is. Uh, and make sure that the arts are accessible to all children, because all children benefit from them. So we want to be inclusive. Some things to watch out for. One is making that model when you're demonstrating the technique. Two is, well, we're almost, we need to hurry along here. And so you kind of try to push them through it. Another is we kind of sometimes we'll waste their time because we don't have our materials ready. And so they may be ready to do things, but we aren't. Um, Being over directive, saying do step one, do step two, do step three, and only reinforcing pictures that look realistic. So only praising those pictures that have, when the product and the outcome, it's like we're trying to increase their proficiency in drawing by praising those pictures that are looking more realistic.